be light.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you this evening to share my story, and I'm particularly appreciative to the museum, to Garth.
Got to get your mouth right, sort of up there. I'm sorry, Sana.
Should I start again?
No, I think they heard that, but I just want to make sure that you are your full self.
So I'm deeply appreciative to the museum, to Garth, and everyone who is responsible for putting up this incredibly beautiful exhibition without me. In fact, I don't think I've ever had a show where somebody's put it up without consulting me. It's incredibly beautiful. So I'm going to read a little bit, and then I'm going to go through images and then read a little bit. We all have stories. These stories are our fertile ground. They propel us in myriad ways. Tonight, you are my audience, and I'm happy to share mine with you. I'm a native New Yorker. I grew up in St. Albans, Queens, the house that I grew up in. My studio is in my backyard. I have 4 sisters, 7 nieces and nephews, and 2 grandnieces. I grew up in an extended family system. I had many moms and dads. They were my neighbors. Everyone was aunt or uncle. Blood had nothing to do with our bond. I'm educated in the public school system via a product of open enrollment. It's where Black children were bused into white schools for quality education. Both my parents are from the turbulent South, were extremely hesitant when my teachers insisted that they consider this for me. They were haunted by their childhood. My mom and her sisters were chased home from school from the KKK. The KKK also marched through their neighborhoods and terrorized them. They grew up with tremendous fear. I was 9 years old, sitting at the kitchen table, listening to them debate, and I wondered, why didn't they make our schools better? My parents, my mother's parents. My childhood dining room table is where the impetus to explore the world was encouraged. My dad made a career out of the military, not by choice, but by circumstances. There were few opportunities for a brown person born in 1916. Our dining room table, my mom and dad told wonderful stories and their guests that came from throughout the world. My sisters and I were big listeners, and I was a dreamer. I began to dream of faraway places that I would venture to one day. I would swing on the swing in the backyard, and I would sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow over and over and over again. I dreamed of places where you heard different languages, saw different dress, people had different adornment practices, and where gods had many different names. I never in my life feared difference. Instead, I loved it. As a young adult, I saw travel as a way to expand my personal boundaries, to go beyond the comfort zone that I'd grown up in. When my buddies were entering into grad programs, I was entering into the traditional lives of both cultures. I come from 4 generations of Black American narratives of pride, love, resistance, perseverance, deep kindness, hope, and faith. When I began to embark on world travel, it was not difficult where to choose to go. Clay is everywhere, and I was in search of my dining room table. As a woman solo traveler and traveling alone, often the first thing I do is go to markets. In markets, they're filled with women, and I know that I'm going to make a woman friend, and I know that this woman friend is going to have a daughter, and her daughter is going to become my guide, teach me the language, and keep me safe, teach me how to eat the way they eat properly, how to dress the way they dress, how to say the good morning greetings. She's going to protect me. These are my little guides. Our roles change like the seasons. In some cases, these little girls become my mommy. In other cases, I'm theirs. In my travels, I'm looking for clay. I'm looking for architecture. I'm looking at other women. I'm looking at temples. I'm looking at how food is prepared, how people talk to each other. I'm looking at everything and I'm recording it. This woman is in the floating market in Vietnam. I go purely to see her smile at me. I'm also motivated by this thing to go beyond everyone's personal boundaries, to have what you can have regardless to your economical circumstances. So this is my friend's son who wants to pump up his chest. And so he's just drilled holes into 2 stones and put a dowel. And this is what he pumps up his chest in every day. This charms my spirit when I see it. And this is his little brother who's caught a beetle and tied a string onto the beetle's leg. The beetle right now is exhausted, but when it's not tired, it's his airplane. It flies through the village on that string. And at the end of the day, he takes the string off, he feeds it some melon, and it wobbles off. And the next day he catches another beetle. This stuff touches my heart. He'll never have a real airplane, but he's got a beetle. This is a young man by the name of Lahai that I met in the Ghanaian airport. He had a few coins in his hand, and he told me if I fed him 1 meal a day, that he would show me Africa. It is his village that I lived in 5 seasons. I'm looking at tools and how people use them. I'm looking at the architecture of this clay. I'm making friendships, hopefully for a lifetime, and I'm visiting friends that I went to grad school with. My hair is a curiosity around the world. I try to explain that it grows out of my head like this. Nobody ever gets it. I'm also looking at adornment practices, some that are extremely dangerous and some that are purely aesthetic. But in all of these travels and moving around, the first thing I saw when I started moving around the world were little girls, looking at their lives, seeing difference. They became my focus point up until this very day. Sometimes on the road, I pick up clay, I begin to build, and I ship things home. See, these are images of different studio spaces that I've been in. Sometimes the things that I see in the landscape end up on the skin of my work. It's not always intentional. I just sometimes trust instinctively what I feel. This is the rice paddies in Vietnam. And this is my interpretation of it on my sculpture. This is the Achaean needle that can be found in many parts of the world. This is needles that are used for female excision. This is a beautiful temple in Dima, in Burma, with all the beautiful sgraffito lines. And this is my interpretation on one of my water vessels. This is the landscape in Kenya, which is so, so beautiful. And I put on the side of one of my vessels. This is my girlfriend's corn house, and this is my interpretation of it. The basket market. This is cinnamon on the side of a road in Cambodia. It is so beautiful. It gave me the idea of taking my maple tree series and putting information not only in the forms, but along the forms. And this is cabbage going to the market. No plastic bags, it's just pushed into a truck so tight. And this is me compressing the same kind of forms within the walls of my pieces. Sometimes in traveling, I've studied one language, and when I get there, it's a whole nother dialect. And so at that point, I have to use other senses to read and understand. So sign and symbol. This young man is getting ready for the hunt. This young lady, is interested in courtship. She's adorned her hair with millet. She is signaling to him, I can make bread to feed our children. He's telling her with the antlers, I can hunt and provide meat. This is the way of communicating. Traditional clothes in different cultures depict identity. So this is the Lisu Hill tribe along the Golden Triangle. Their clothing is incredibly beautiful and colorful. I have every Hill tribe outfit in the world. I don't dare wear it in the country when it speaks of identity out of respect. And this is I'm of a generation of the Vietnam War. This is the Viet Cong hat that is now still being used. I own one of these, but I will not wear them for my community because most of my guy friends from high school were drafted in the Vietnam War and never came home, or if they did come home, they didn't come home normal. This is what the Maasai people who are blessing my feet because I've lived with them for 3 or 4 months, and they're blessing my feet to go home. And this is my kitchen that Lahai took me to in Minde, Sierra Leone. And I walked in and looked at the painting on the wall that is made with terra sigillata, a fine particle clay. I became very emotional, and he said, aren't you happy? Don't you like it? And I said to him, these patterns, I've been carving them on my pots for 20 years, yet I've never seen them until now. And he just said, welcome home, sister. These are your residual echoes. Also sign and symbol, she's saying, my breast is strong, I can feed. These young girls are getting adorned for the female excision ritual. These are hill tribes in all of their beautiful, beautiful, beautiful clothing. I ask every time I take a photograph of somebody, can I have the permission to take their photograph? These women on the left said yes, but as soon as I pulled out my camera, they turned their backs. I didn't care. The back was just as beautiful as the front. This is market day. Sometimes 6 or 7 different tribes come together and they all speak different languages. And so everything becomes pictorial. So there's pictures of what you want to do. You go to the doctor, he has a book of images and you point to what your ailment is. And so here you look at the picture of the haircut and you point to it. A maple tree series, a body of work that I spent 10 years working on, where the tree was used as a social political symbol to speak out against slavery. When I read this story on Amtrak, going to Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania to do a workshop, I became outraged with this beautiful story of 3 groups of people, Native Americans, the Dutch, indentured servants and Europeans who walked through the streets with the branches of the maple tree protesting that human beings were being recycled to the Caribbean to work on sugarcane plantations. I asked myself, why was this not in any of our history books? Who decided that the story was not important? So I spent 10 years, I moved to Holland, to the European Ceramic Center, and began to make these pieces. The reoccurring icon in these pictures is the hand. In all genocides, in all Holocausts, in all wars, the hand is the most important thing. With the sugarcane plantations, people's hands became very, very damaged and cut and bruised because they were free. They were stolen from their land. There was no health care. So the master would just amputate the finger. If they went to 2 fingers, 3 fingers, they then kill them. So the hand became monumentally important to me to put into the work. Also at this particular time, my mother went blind, and for the final 7 years of her life, she refused to speak. She was brokenhearted, and instead she used her hands to communicate. So I'd come home from school and see her handprints on the wall, and they would dictate what she did during the day. She insisted, even in her blindness, to still continue to cook and to clean and be in her kitchen And many times she'd make mistakes and burn herself or burn her clothes, and she'd be angry, and you would see that you could distinguish between the hand slap on the wall that was out of anger or the one that was in tenderness. For 16 years, I worked with alternative to incarcerated youth in New York City. All of these kids between the ages of 14 and 21 were taken out of jail and brought to cases where we worked with them. The education department was made up of all artists, and so we all taught from our own experiences. Every one of these kids to be protected was in a gang. I wanted to diffuse the idea of gangs, so I decided to do art in public places with them. I found these tables outside of Starbucks, and I went and got a cab and put them in, and I took them to the incarceration center, and I said, we're going to make mosaic tables, and we're going to put them back in Starbucks. And I talked to the manager, and the managers consented. And so I would take 6 and 7 kids and bring them around one table. All of my kids were gang affiliated, and the blues didn't work with the reds, and I wanted to demystify that. And I said, no, all of our hands will touch these tables. So this is one that's sitting actually in Starbucks, Lower Manhattan. I participate in a process of feminist art, which is based upon uncovering, speaking, expressing, and making public the experiences of women and little girls. I seek out art in the service of a cause, an art that wants to affect, inspire, and educate to action, as well as to please. Little girls who I treasure. I look at their lives and I see difference, major difference. Sometimes they don't go to school, and if they do, they're snatched out. If a male student, male member of the family needs the money. Sometimes they're married off to men 6, 7 times their age. Sometimes parts of their bodies are excised. They are bartered, exchanged, given away, and sometimes sold. They have their responsibilities of adult women by the time they're 6 or 7 years old. So both these young girls, neither one of them have breasts. So I will say they're under the age of 11, and they've got infants on their backs. This little baby, little African baby, is just 4 days old, and she's the caretaker because her mom is working on the farm or in the bush. They get up in the morning and they wash clothes. They cook, all of this before they go to school, if they go to school. I was on a little boat in Vietnam, and it ran out of fuel, and the driver parked it to the side and said, I'll be right back. I had 2 water bottles, and it was in the sun. And I drank the water as slowly as I could, and the sun was beaming in on me. And this little girl saw that my water bottle was empty, and she climbed a coconut tree and took a machete out and cut the coconut, and she leaned over and handed me the water. And this is a little girl who's pounding millet before she goes to school. These are 2 little girls from diverse parts of the world, but the little girl with the powder on top of her head, she was sent to my hut to take me to the doctor, and I was shocked when she came. She looked like a 2-year-old, and I looked at her and I said, oh no. And she said, come, and I went. The House series, a body of work that I started actually at Alfred, and that's a picture of me on the right-hand side. Yes, at Alfred, where I began them. And I'm particularly touched by this body of work because I had no art school training. I went to CCNY to be what my mother and father could have never been. If my mother and father had lived in their perfect world, my father would have been a lawyer, an anthropologist. My mother, a nurse, or anything but what she ended up being, which was a domestic. So in traveling around the world, being by myself, my body became my house. This body of work I made traveling in different places, and I shipped it home. This is the work that I entered graduate school with. They range from 3 feet to about 8 feet, depending upon where I was and what my kiln size were. Most of them are single form, some of them are in sections. When I didn't get into graduate school the first time off of these linear tall ones, I went to the Archie Bray. I took the story with me, but I reduced the scale of the houses because I couldn't afford to send big pieces through the United States. It's very inexpensive for me to work in Vietnam or Cambodia because I put them on a boat that takes 3 or 4 months. And by the time they get to the States, I've already saved up the money to pay for them. So these are smaller pieces, but they're still talking about the house. These are new pieces because I've returned to the house series, and this body of work will be returning to ourselves. During the pandemic, I was isolated for 5 months where I didn't see anyone. I only saw my family on Zoom. I didn't even see the mailman. The bus in my neighborhood stopped running, and my neighbors, the neighborhood I live in, my mother's friends are between 90 and 103 years of age. They were already in pandemic mode before the pandemic hit. They never leave the house. They always sit. So I was always concerned about going to them and making them sick because I was crazy and I still would walk the streets at night. So sitting in my house, really melancholy and sad, I looked at the 12 houses that I still had remaining, and I sat with them daily. And I looked at them. I didn't cry tears because I was empty inside, but I asked them, are you as lonesome as I am? Are you as hollow as I am? And they whispered, Sana, you saved us 40 years. Now save yourself. I then returned to the studio and began to make them, but I was haunted by what was going on in the world with the George Floyd murder. And I didn't know what the world wanted from me, what the world needed from me. I felt this civic responsibility to march. At the same time, I needed to heal, to make sculptures. I tried to work, but I couldn't. And so I marched for 3.5 months. And then I returned to my studio and began to build them. I'm returning to this body of work because it's a special body of work for me. And I will return to all the places in the world where they were created, starting in the summer, and I will remake them. This is another body of work. It's the Unspeakable series, and it speaks about female excision. A ritualistic surgery that has lasted over 10,000 years of age. There are thousands and thousands of different reasons for why this procedure has ever existed. It is outlawed in many, many parts of the world, but sometimes it's secretly practiced. Unfortunately, we only hear about female excision as a procedure that comes from the continent, but it's not true. My mother's sister, my Aunt Dot, worked at Creedmoor State Hospital in the 50s, and she would prep mentally insane women, violent women, for excision. It was outlawed in the hospitals in 1947. Another ritual that I'm very involved with was foot binding. It has very, very strong links to excision. These procedures were based upon a beauty aesthetic that somebody else has decided. They're both harmful. They both take many years of healing. They're extremely painful, and sometimes death comes from them. When a girl's foot is being bound, it takes 7 years. During that time period, she's learning how to embroidery. When her mother wants to marry her off, she takes the embroidery to the family of the man that she wants to leave her daughter into. Her in-law will look at the embroidery, and it's the quality of the stitching that will tell her how docile her new daughter-in-law will be, how quiet she will be, how she will sit still and be obedient. They're sitting on pieces of glass because after the procedure is first done or the foot is broken and then Band-Aid underneath each other except for the toe, the mother picks up her daughter, puts candy in her mouth, and then she spanks her legs. When her daughter says, "Mommy, it feels like broken glass," her mother knows the procedure was successful. In the beginning of making the female pieces on female excision, because it was a procedure that I lived in a village where it was happening around me. I wanted my village, my world, my dining room table to know about it. I never read about it, but here I was in the midst of it. So when I started making them, I made them the length of my face because I wanted to bring home and put my face up in everybody's face and talk about it. I felt that it was important that we know what happens in the lives of our little girls. In 1991, this procedure became worldwide and everybody knew about it. As a result, little girls in villages who never knew about this procedure that was going to happen to them knew about it then because it was secret society and they were running away from their villages not to have it done. When a daughter would run away from a village, her mother would be excommunicated for not having raised the daughter. So what I did is so what happened as a result of that, they began to do the procedure on younger and younger girls. So normally it was 13 and older. It now became to the point where it could be done when you were just 8 or 9 days old. So I reduced the scale to the size of your hand for the next body of work of these. These rituals, many rituals, even rituals in our own lives as women, where we have our rib cages, our waistlines tucked, or this pushed on. All these things have to do with being female, and aesthetic sometimes is dictated by someone else. These cultures, it was about life. It was about being female. It was about being silent. It was also taboo. You never told anyone that happened. So if a girl was 13 and had this procedure, she never told the girl who was 12 that this was going to happen. It was secret. There was also taboo, but they were also powerful. A girl's foot who was bound was considered incredibly beautiful. She didn't work. She sat around and she was adorned. A woman, after she's been, a young girl, after she's been excised, can probably eat meat for the first time. She can get a hut and begin to build it. She can flirt with a man. So they were empowering, and that's why it was so hard to stop a ritual. My feeling was, keep the ritual, stop the cutting. In Mindeland, the ritual was 3 months. A girl went away from her village with other girls the same age. They would dance, they would learn their mother tongue, they would learn how to cook, they would get their hair adorned. It'd be the first time in their lives that they were celebrated for being women. They loved it and they enjoyed it. They learned how to hunt. They learned how to be safe. They learned self-defense. This is a tribal or bush education. They don't sit in classrooms. Without this orientation, they could not survive. So I said, keep the ritual because the ritual is important, but stop the cutting. This is Somaly Mam Foundation, which I read about many, many years ago, a woman who was raised in Cambodia and ended up into the brothel system as a young girl. This is the Glamour magazine that I read about that had the article about Somaly. I read it over the shoulder of a woman on the E-train going home one night. I read about 5 women changing the world in 5 wonderful, incredible ways. But Somaly's story sank into my gut. It went under my skin. It made me sick. I took this magazine with, I called her up, I went on the line and I found her on the internet and I apologized for what happened to her childhood. And then I felt a lot better because I was sick because of the stomach and I went to lay down and then I got back up because I was sick to my stomach again and I got back on the computer and I wrote her and said, what can I do? She wrote back several hours later and said, come to Cambodia. That was in June that this magazine comes out advertising the 5 women. And I left for Cambodia in December. I had to get another job and save up the couple of $1,000s to go. But I used this Glamour magazine as my passport to enter into their worlds. These are girls all in safe houses now after they've been rescued. Child sex exploitation is the most hidden form of child abuse in America today. It's the nation's least recognized epidemic. Fatherless girls, motherless daughters placed in foster care, not drug addicted, but love addicted. 75% of sexually exploited girls end up in the hands of a pimp. These are the signs that are around Cambodia and Phnom Penh and Vietnam protesting sex tours. Prostitution is not sex work. It is a form of violence against women. This is a sign that my girlfriend, Birdie, who I went to graduate school, gave me. She was in Sweden, and Sweden has a very different reaction to sex workers. They don't ever arrest a woman for selling her body. They arrest the man for having the audacity that he could think he could buy a body. I look for these signs in all the guest houses that I stay in. It's a child-safe hotel policy. I will not stay in a hotel that turns into a brothel at midnight. This is a sign that's in the airport when you enter. I didn't see it until my 8th year. And these 6 girls were the first girls that died after being rescued from a brothel. The centers are named after them. As a result of Somali's work, many, many brothels have been shut down. But what has opened up in exchange is the Happy Man Bar. It starts off as a bar in the evening. By midnight, it turns into a brothel. You don't have to be a feminist or a woman to protest violence against women, little girls, or anyone. You just have to be human. And that's something every one of us in this room is. When I first went to Cambodia, I took dolls. The girls at an incarceration center. I told them about Somali. I told them about the girls. All of my girls in the incarceration center were brown girls, and they only think these atrocities happen to them because of their dark brown skin. And in many cases, it's true, but I don't want them at 14 and 15 to grow up believing this. So to diffuse that, I let them see what Somali looks like, and Somali's girls who are light skinned and straight hair. And they looked at these pictures and they became so quiet. And they said, Sana, they were never little girls. And I said, that's right. And we in the incarceration center worked on a doll project where they get a blank doll. One side of the doll is their past, and the other side of the doll is where they're going. And they work on it for 3.5 months. And I watched them with the art therapist make these beautiful dolls at the other side that would have guns on it, or cut marks, or stab wounds and razor blades. Then the other side would have a diploma and shoes and books in their hands. And I thought, wow, the girls in Cambodia, why do I take that project too? So the girls gifted me 16 dolls to take to Cambodia as gifts. And then I went to Pearl Paint and I brought about 50 blank dolls. And so this is our first year, and these are the dolls that we made together. I never knew that I would ever go back to Cambodia after that first trip. I went there with art supplies. I went there with an art therapist with me, a friend, and we worked at 4 different safe houses with over 150 girls in 3 days. But when I looked at these girls dance, sing, be pugnacious with each other, sassy, when I saw them leaning on me, touching my hair, touching my skin, when they allowed me to see the burn marks on their bodies from the pimps, or the chain link around their ankles where it was indented from them pulling, trying to get away from the bed they were locked to. When they allowed me to see these things, I realized that these girls trust me. They trust me. And I told Jessica, I'm coming back next year. In fact, I'm coming back for the rest of my life. I want to watch them grow up and heal. So we made Zuri slippers, we made dolls, we made hats, we made felted flowers. I taught the girls all the crafts I knew how to do. In exchange, they taught me that there's life after death, because what they went through in the brothels was death. These are dream catchers that I made with them one year And Somali teaches their girls that they have to have more than one dream, that life will lead them in different directions, and they have to have a backup plan. And so I said to myself, why not take dream catchers and teach them how to make dream catchers? No girl works on a doll alone. They work in community. Somalia has taught them that they have recreated a new family. Some of them don't even know who their family is anymore. One woman in particular, Sina, told me maybe 8 years ago, I've known her 10 years, she says, Sana, I'm not even Cambodian, I'm Vietnamese. And I said, how did you find out? She said, on the World Missing Children link, a relative recognized me. But she says, I'm Cambodian now. She came, her mother was washing clothes in the river and turned around and she was gone. And then she was taken into Cambodia and she was sold as a virgin. I love her laughter. Sometimes I become their students, and this is where they're teaching me how to carve fruit. This is Somali at the safe house that she has now, and this is her reading stories to the children. Unfortunately, every year when I go, they're younger and younger and younger. This is a young girl that's been with Somali probably about 3.5 years. On the 5th year, it's time to go to court. She has been trained, she's been schooled, she's been prepped through song, through dance, through therapy, that she must go to the court and point to the person who sold her. In many cases, it's a family member or a neighbor. She has tremendous anxiety this morning, knowing that in court, she has to look in the face of the abductor. These are 2 girls that Somali has just rescued. She gets a call and she goes and gets them, takes her to the safe house. This is after 2 years of being away from the pandemic, and the government is really respecting Somali, and she has a whole new center now. And all of these young ladies that you're looking at, I met them when they were 14. They're now between 31 and 38 years of age. They've all grown up, gone off to college. And I'm over here laughing with Bai because she's laughing and saying, you're short. And I'm saying, I was always short. You grew up. And this is last year when I went to the safe house and I said, can I see the girls? And they walked me into a room and these were the girls, they're babies. None of them are over the age of 7 or 8. Some of them have already been violated. And this is this year. All of them taller, happier. This is a woman that I met in Cambodia, and she was building an orphanage. With street kids, lots of street kids, kids that lost their parents to the Khmer Rouge. And I asked her, why are you doing that? She said, if not me, then who? And then she has another thing that she says that in the end, they cannot say that I did nothing. I developed the Apron Project 8 years into going to Cambodia. And the reason why is that if Somali can rescue a girl between the ages of 3 and about 8, she has far more chances of surviving and being installed back into society than a girl that gets rescued between 14 and 21. That young girl can get the therapy, the meds, the love and care, and go back to school. But if you get rescued at 16 or 17 or 20 in Cambodia, there are no remedial programs, so you can't go to school. Somali teaches computer skills, she teaches language, self-defense, fish farming, weaving, hairdressing, but it's not enough for these girls to really make a living for their families. So by day, I work with Somali and the girls, and by evening, I'm a tourist. And the brothels are weaved right in between 5-star hotels, I began to recognize girls from 10 years ago who had re-entered themselves back into the system. One girl said something to me that I'll never forget. She says, Sana, and I could tell by her dress that she was back in the system. She says, life has been hard, very difficult since I left Somalia, but I know surrender. I know surrender. So I decided to come up with a project to help supplement their income, and I came up with the Apron Project. My mother was a domestic, and to have some kind of pride in cleaning people's homes, she made her own aprons and pinafores. My mother died January 3rd, 49 years ago. But every year when I travel, I take a piece of something that belonged to my mom with me so that she's with me. And I took her apron one year, and it was my pillowcase. And I looked at that apron and said, why don't I start the Apron Project with these girls? So I've got the 8 girls, the eldest girls, and we began to make aprons. We meet once a year. I go for 7 weeks. These girls come for 3 days straight with me, and then they go back to their villages, and then they come back, and we make aprons. When they come, they bring their babies with them. Many of them are farmers. Some of them are cooks. Some of them are tourist guides. Some are weavers, but they don't make enough money to really sustain themselves, but the Apron Project does help. In the very beginning, I was depressed. Every year I'd come back and I wouldn't see conditions change according to my standards. I still see their children running around with no shoes on, their clothes sometimes soiled, no underwear. And I would hurt over it, saying, my project is not improving their lives. Why am I doing it? If they can't buy shoes and underwear or get medicine, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why isn't it improving? And I talked to Somaly about it, and she said it is improving. It's just not improving on your standard, but it is. And she also said to me that Ren, with the young lady with the hat on, who was sold by a family member, who now has a daughter, she says, Sana, she'll never sell her daughter. The cycle has been broken. So these are the girls in the Apron Project. This is Ang and Kinya, Retsa and Kim. These are 2 girls that were just walking down the street, and they stood and looked. I didn't know them. I asked Kim, what's going on? She said, they're looking for work. And so I looked at my girls and I said, can we hire them to work? And they said, of course. So they joined us for one day and made aprons. At the conclusion of working with me, we worked from 7 in the morning until close to 10 at night. And then I went to Kim and Ren and I said, how much do I pay them? How much do I pay them? And she said, you can give them $5 a piece. I said, no, that's not enough. She said, Sana, all they make is $1 a day. I said, no. So I handed the one on the left $25, and she began to take it and divide it between the other 2 girls. And I clamped her hands and I said, no, it's yours. And she looked at the money, looked at me, looked at the money. And then I handed the other one. And then in Cambodia, hugging is not traditional. What you do is you rub your nose to somebody or you pinch their cheek. So I went to hug her, and all my girls now are huggers because I trained them. But these 2 girls didn't know what hugging meant. And so I grabbed her, the one with the gray blouse on, and I hugged her. And it was like hugging a piece of wood because she was so unfamiliar with the hug. But I didn't let go. And I slowly felt her hands climb my body and hug me back. My girls. This is after the pandemic. I missed them deeply, deeply for 2 years. And I promised them when I met them that I would never, never, ever abandon them. So even though I could not fly to Cambodia because the border was shut for Westerners, I sent them money both years for them to make aprons. And I just said, think outside the box, just make them. So here's some aprons. This is Pizza, now all grown up. She has a beautiful boutique and makes wonderful clothing. It's on. I stay in guest houses. I don't stay in fancy hotels. I believe that when I'm in a place working with people that I should live as close as I can to their standards. And I have to have water. It has to be clean. But I stay in guest houses that don't cost any more than $10 or $12 a week, a night. What I do in these guest houses, I make friends with the maids, because in a way I'm making a friend with my mom. And so these are the maids that would come and clean my room. And they saw me with the aprons and they loved them, so I gave them them. Here are the aprons from this year. And this woman on the far left, when she would see me on the side of the road laying out the aprons that photographed them, she would come and sit next to them and touch them and look at them and speak to me in Khmer and tell me how beautiful they are. Kadu, kadu, kadu. And so I gave one to her. Okay. Guys, help me. Oh, he's not even here. Okay, 1 second. Why won't you work? Okay. Okay, she's saying, Kiam Cho Kinsa. My name is Kinsa. I am a survivor. This is Ren with her mother, and she has just given birth to her second child, and her mother's come to live with her. And this is Ren, and I guess this won't work either. Yes, she's saying, Kiam Sam Ren. My name is Ren. I am a survivor. This is Ren when she had Pili, her daughter, and that's when the Apron Project started. And this is her daughter, Pili, maybe at the age of 2.5, 3. And I'm washing my clothes and she's telling me I'm doing it all wrong. So I just handed her the bucket, let her wash, and I just photographed her. And here she is teaching me how to count. And I'm just sorry, you just can't hear her beautiful voice as she counts from 1 to 50 for me. These are the I See Me dolls, which is a series that coexists with many other series. And their story about my mom making a doll with me in my teens when I wasn't feeling as pretty as all the other girls that were on the block. And the guys were only going after Black girls that were mixed with straight hair and keen features and hair that blew in the wind. And we made a doll with my hair from a comb, from my brushes, and put beads in it. And my mother had so much joy in making this doll, and I had so much joy sitting next to her, growing up in a crowded household with 4 sisters, aunts and uncles that came and go, some that never left. And she made this doll with me and asked me, is this doll beautiful, Sama? And I said, yeah, Mommy, it is beautiful. And she said, and so are you. And she says, never compare your beauty, never. You were born with it. My mother went blind in my late teens, and Braille became her way of communicating. And this is me making her Braille tiles. And these are the aprons that she made to go to work, to feel beautiful when she cleaned other people's homes. And so I took them and began to adorn them with her images. Whenever I was having a hard time in school or scared because of something, because I was in these schools and the only Black child in 4th and 5th grade, where the teacher only gave me a black crayon to play with, to draw with. And I'd come home and I'd tell my mother this, and she said, you're a pioneer. And I said, I don't want to be a pioneer. I just want to be 9 years old. And when I would go out the door, the bus driver who would be outside waiting for me, she would whisper, Mommy's in your pocket. So I have her in the pocket of the aprons. And these are the Braille tiles. And what I've done is I put handles on them to represent an apron. Art is about a particular person in a particular place at a particular time. I went to Cambodia, Somaly Mam, to Cambodia had other lessons for me to learn. I was 21 years old when the Khmer Rouge invaded Phnom Penh. I did not read about it in our newspapers. Cambodia taught me about it. I go to the killing fields with my friends who are still looking 38 years later for members of their families. They go with a picture of what their family member had on last. Most victims were derobed before they were killed. They weren't honorably killed with a bullet. They were usually beat to death, but they were derobed, so their clothing are there in the tombs, and their skeletal remains are all over the killing fields. These are some of the signs in the killing field. There's a tomb there that has the skulls. All of these skulls have a hole in it. This is the work that began out of that series, is unknown, unnamed mass burials all over the world, people who weren't given the dignity of a burial site or a name. Pearl soldiers, Mindyland, where I lived for 4 seasons. One day, the paramount chief came and told me that I must leave. I couldn't understand why I had to leave Mindyland. A civil war was breaking out, and rebels were raiding villages and killing people. He said, "We can no longer protect you." He sent 3 girls to walk me to the lorry truck that would take me to the capital city, to take me out of Sierra Leone into a neighboring country that we saved. I cried the entire way that we walked, and the girls wouldn't make any eye contact with me. I couldn't understand why I couldn't stay in Mindyland. Months later, I'm coming home, letters came. "Sana, they're hurting me. Sana, come back. Sana, they took our land." There was nothing that I could do about it. I traveled back years later to see if I could find, and all of Mindyland, Sierra Leone, is a burial ground. Nothing but the soil that's saturated with dried blood. I did meet survivors. These pieces, one is, I used to weave beautiful baskets. The other is, I wanted to play sports. I once played with dolls, now I kill. The topsy-turvy dolls, which is in the exhibit, is a new body of work. My subject matter is hurtful sometimes. Sometimes it makes me feel like I'm not doing enough in the world to change things. I decided the weight of this kind of work, I should lighten up a little bit, make things that make me laugh, like the I See Me doll series. So with my elders all dying, my sisters and I would go to the Carolinas to empty out homes, and I found a topsy-turvy doll. It was black and white. It is a doll that enslaved women made for their daughters so their daughters could play. During slavery, enslaved people could not have toys. So the children who were the products of the master in the house played with the master's children's toys. The house slaves were very clever, and they made a doll that had a black face and a white face. They instructed their daughters that when the master's here, you can only play with the white face, because they weren't allowed to have dolls, and he would just assume that they're playing with his daughter's doll. But when the master's not here, you flip the doll. Mommy wants you to see you. So I don't think these will turn either, but they're in the show. Instead of making them black and white, oh, they are, okay. Instead of them making them black and white, I decided to make them off of important women in my life. These are a few images of things on the road that are quite beautiful, that keep me lifted and motivate me and make me think that I'm doing the right thing at the right time. love these flip-flops. This woman says, what size got to do with it? This is Sinna, and this is Nora. Sinna is the one with the orange around her neck that told me many years later, Sana, I'm not even Cambodian, I'm Vietnamese. She's the one that was found. She has burn marks all over her stomach where cigarettes were put out on her. And this is Nora on the other side, who's a survivor, who has gone off to college and come back to work for Somaly like all the other girls. And she just had a baby 3 months ago that I was able to go see and visit 3 weeks ago. These are signs that are very important to me. All mothers were summoned in George Floyd call out for his mama. Activism is my rent for living on the planet. And I try to walk through the world heart first. So when I'm working with the girls, we dance, we sing. It's not gonna play, okay. She's singing to me a beautiful song. We sing, we dance, we laugh. We hike, we think, we dream. We study Khmer, we study English. We love each other. I also know their moms. Their moms come and sit with us sometimes while we sew. And always, before we go, they know Sana hugs. And this you're not gonna see, which is so wonderful, but unfortunately, you're not gonna see it, okay? This is me dancing with Kim and Ren. Well, not the music, but you got this. Can I make music, Garth, or no? No, let's see if I can. Oh, yes. I didn't birth any of these girls, but it feels like I did. I love them. Thank you.
Okay. So we had a few technical issues and that cut into our time a little bit, but we do have time for a couple of questions. But Sana, I wanted to start by asking you a question about the juncture that you find yourself at now. One of the things that we talked about with the students today was that for many, many years, for decades, you've been juggling 7 jobs, working at different colleges, teaching at art centers, and you're about to retire from all of that. So can you tell us about your next move?
Yes, last summer I had the opportunity of going back to Alfred after 36 years from graduation. I was invited by Adira Willard to go, and it was there that I went for 5 weeks. And in that studio, getting in at 7 in the morning and 11 at night, this tremendous feeling of joy seeped into every pore in my body. And I realized that in 26 years, my art had become part-time and all my jobs had dominated and were pushed in front of it. I did get into the studio, but sometimes fragmented times, sometimes when I lost my ideas or I lost what I was doing because I'd have to get up at 5 in the morning to get the other jobs. So working there, I created 5 beautiful new houses, thinking about returning to myself, and got a driver and drove them home On the way home on the bus, a 7-hour ride, every hour, the joy that I felt for 5 weeks drained from my body. By the time I'd gotten to Penn Station, I knew within 2 days I would be back to 6 jobs, 5 days a week, and I became depressed. I sat in the living room with the houses, and looked up at them, and I wanted them to whisper to me again what to do. And I indirectly and metaphorically they did. They once again said, Sana, you saved us, go save yourself. So I sat on it, I meditated on it, and in 2 weeks, I began to resign from every job that I had. I had 6 jobs at the time, now I just have 2. The job, I'm at John Jay, which I will finish up at the end of the semester, and then Jamaica Art Center in my neighborhood, where I work with kids, I will finish up in July. I then applied for 12 residencies around the world, most of them in the places that I made the houses, and I applied. I got into 5. As of June 3rd, I will move to North Carolina for residency number 1, which is a township. And I'm really, really happy and lucky that in September, I will be going back to the Archie Bray Foundation to work there. And from Archie Bray, I hope to jump over to Red Lodge in Montana, from there to Cambodia, from there to China, from there to Japan, from there to Sweden, back home in between these times for little breaks. But my plan is for the next 3 years to walk around the world, returning to myself, heart first. Thank you.
All right, so I think we can wrap it. What a beautiful way to return to yourself in the closing. So on behalf of the Everson Museum of Art, the Chronicles of American Ceramics Foundation, and Syracuse University, thank you so much, Sana, and come back soon.
Thank you, Garth.